Shoulder and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. Well, this month, we're discussing a film called Mulan, which came out on Disney Plus this year, and another film called Mulan, which was released in 1998 and is available on Disney Plus. The connection being that, well, they're based on the same story.
Oh, Disney Plus, what don't you have?
And it was worth saying that in the lead up to this episode, William shared with us the original, well, an English translation of the original...
A poem or song, I guess.
Mandarin?
Mandarin, yeah.
Yeah, and Mandarin, which was... in terms of the English translation, beautiful. And I can only imagine what the 5-character, 31-line symmetry of
it's
the
like
original...
an ode to Mulan, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful piece of literature that has then been extrapolated into 90s dance hits and shots of New Zealand. Anyways, let's hear about 1998, the the animated film. Sarah, give us a bit of an overview of Mulan 1998.
Okay, so Mulan was an animated movie back in 1998 when that was still quite a big deal. And directed by Tony Bancroft and Barry Cook. And it's basically the story of a young woman called Mulan, who masquerades as a young man in order to break her way into the Chinese Imperial Army and fight for her country, and also in so doing save her father's honor, because the father was unable to join the army himself. And in so doing, Mulan, with her wonderful feminist bravery and good skills, becomes a heroine in Chinese folklore.
Brilliant. You mentioned before you were going to be facetious, and there was nothing facetious
we'll save
in
the
that.
facetiousness. Time and place.
William, I believe you would like to talk to us about another film.
Yeah, so guys. This week I watched another one of these dang Disney live-action reboots. This time of a flawed classic, right? It was mostly filmed in our beautiful New Zealand and tells of a wild-at-heart child who is forced to comply with societal norms when outsiders invade their home. Harboring a desperate secret, they have to choose between duty to family and realizing their true potential in a moving, heartfelt finale. And I would say this is a reboot in the best possible way. Like, it builds upon what works before in the past, but also updates the visuals, the storytelling, and the themes to a contemporary audience. But enough about Pete's Dragon, everyone! Oh my god, we are talking about Mulan 2020, a soulless cash grab of a movie, which is everything that Pete's Dragon is not.
I just have to say, I loved the original Pete's Dragon growing up as a kid. The music, I just have a lot of oh Petey!
Yeah.
Oh Petey! I have not seen the new one, so
it's really good. It's not great. I think there's some pacing issues. But it's very much a modern retelling in the way that it's very emotional. It's not very funny, and it's focusing on the relationship between Pete, Elliot, and also the people around them. Love it.
Great. Yeah. Well, let's then talk about the other film, Mulan. Soulless crash. There we go. Soulless crash. Freudian slip there. Soulless cash grab. Sarah, what say you?
Well, I say no.
I say nay.
I say nay, and nay again, good sir. Well, I can't speak for its soullessness or its cash-grabbingness, but I think it is worth mentioning that it is directed by a woman, and I believe they're saying that's only the second after Ava DuVernay. And is that in terms of budget? Only the second woman of a Disney film or a Disney remake? Because then I'm thinking about good old... now I've forgotten her name. Patty Whatnot, who did Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a Disney film with Wrinkle in Time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it is. So Niki Caro, New Zealand director. And she's got a few films under her belt, and some of them are better than others. But the fact is, I still think that there's something of note there, that it's a female director of Mulan 2020, which I think is appropriate, and that it is one of our own, giving it a good bash. And I know that we're going to come into discussing quite a lot of criticism around representation in the film and myriad issues. And I guess I just want to say I enjoyed Mulan 2020 just fine. I don't think it's a great film, but I enjoyed it just fine. And I feel like it does what it says on the tin. And I feel like she delivers. I feel like Niki Caro delivers, and she delivers a blockbuster, and she delivers beauty, and she delivers scenery, and she delivers a vaguely feminist tale of a young woman who manages to escape the matchmaker's designs and actually remarkably does not wind up betrothed at the end of the movie. I think those are strong points. Are they particularly innovative or special or necessary in 2020? Blah, blah. We shall see.
I agree with you in terms of what Niki Caro brings to this film. I do think that the pace of the movie works quite well in terms of the way that it's being filmed and edited. The scenes are not great, but I think that that's down to the dialogue more than anything. I don't think that the actors are not being given the opportunity to give their all and haven't been guided in that. There's some clear direction there. And it is beautiful to look at.
It's very colourful.
I also agree with you, William. It's really soulless, and I think that the script is
negligible.
Poor. I think it's poor,
Yeah.
so poor. And I'm gonna. It makes sense to compare these two films very closely because the way that the animated film, which is not perfect by any means, but the way the animated film builds its story is so clear, and Mulan has this clear drive to bring honor to her family in a way that is born out of the characters, as opposed to the new one where it's so heavy-handed with how they're introducing that, and it just makes for a story where. Again, we talked last month about Tenet, and I was frustrated in that film about the lack of character and the lack of drive. I feel the same in this new Mulan movie. Things just happen.
Yeah.
They just do things. Whereas in the animated one, she makes choices. She makes really clear choices based on really clear emotional motivations, and then things come out of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do want to take a brief moment just to start off by saying, when we talk about these Disney remakes or reboots, whatever they are, it's a little difficult to look at these movies in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all based on mostly quite beloved properties that people have been weaned on in their childhoods. I know I have. I still have a lot of my old VHS tapes. And there's something that nostalgia does to the brain that cannot be extricated. Like, I have not seen Mulan 98 in probably 10 years, and rewatching it for this podcast, stuff hit me really hard. Really, really hard. I forgot, like, oh, right, this line was pretty funny, or the animation, this bit is pretty cool. And it's just so hard to talk about Mulan 2020 without just continuous reference back to the older film.
True.
That being said, I'm going to do that right now. The thing about the 2020 version that doesn't work, I find, is exactly to a T what doesn't work with the Aladdin reboot, the Lion King reboot, the Jungle Book reboot, which is pretty to look at, not very good, and that I don't think any of these movies understand what makes the original movies, the original animated movies, tick. The pacing often feels flabby. The characters are not fully realized. You watch Lion King, which is by all means an awful movie, Lion King 2019, and then you watch the original Lion King, and Lion King's not a very complicated story. It's a Hamlet ripoff, right? But what you have is these, just like with Mulan, very clear-cut character motivations. It's not present in the new stuff. The new stuff's just drawing off our emotional, connections with the old stuff. Maybe they don't think it's important, or maybe they think that, well, people are already invested. We don't need to introduce more. But I feel like Mulan fails exactly where all the other movies fail. And that's really, really disappointing. Because I was looking forward to this one, you guys.
I think that's so interesting what you say. I'll be honest with you guys. I didn't enjoy having to watch these films for this podcast. And I thought, I'm not going to have anything to say. And I'm so grateful to you, William, for provoking that thought now. And here's what I think. The animation, when you watch Mulan 98, the animation isn't anything to write home about, eh?
Oh, no. It's absolutely something to write home about. It's beautiful.
It was maybe then.
No, I still think it's now. I think there's something... Oh, and we'll talk about the character animation in a second. I think what makes this movie tick is the animation. I think Mulan 98, the character, the voice acting by Mina Wen is not great. I think she's very wooden in places, and her singing voice is Lea Salonga, who is, I just want to say, best Eponine ever. But, I mean, she's a great singer, voice acting is not super great, but the character is imbued by just the minutiae in animation and how she acts as a man even while keeping it feminine, her face, the little twitches in her micro expressions. I really think the animation makes her so much more interesting than live action Mulan, who is just a cipher.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the writing, maybe it's the actor, maybe it's both. But I think you guys know now, I'm a fan of animation. But
Yeah.
I think Mulan is beautifully animated, even by today's standards with all the new tech and stuff.
Okay. Well, I totally respect that, and I certainly don't mean it isn't beautifully animated, but I guess I mean that I'm more struck that in recent animated films there's been maybe a technological thing going on that makes you go, holy mackerel, we've never seen that before. And looking back 22 years to Mulan 98, I feel like I'm seeing something perfectly lovely, but not startling. And I guess I was just going to hypothesize, and already I'm now doubting myself, but I was going to hypothesize, because Lion King to me, old Lion King, is just an animated movie, but it's got heart, which I think is what you're arguing that Mulan is. It has heart. And I'm wondering whether these live action remakes, I mean, look, Mulan 2020 feels for the most part like a carbon copy of 98 in terms of what it does. It's just that it's got humans in it. And I wonder whether, again, the brain connection and whatnot is that we will watch, we're raised on animated movies, aren't we, arguably, from a little age. And we watch Cinderella, if you're as old as I am, and you don't think, oh, she doesn't seem very realistic. You think, that's Cinderella. But when you're seeing a human person, I don't know, I feel like we expect more, and we expect depth, and we expect layers, and we expect nuance, and we expect things that if it ain't written, you're not getting it. And that's why 2020 just feels a little bit like a video game.
I think that, I agree with both of you, I think that those Disney animated movies of the Disney Renaissance of the late 80s, 90s period, they took, well, again, known properties, those fairy tales, they're all known fairy tales, or they're known stories, and then they recrafted them, reforged them, and they brought with them the humor, the music, the I guess relatable storylines that could have the kind of widest appeal possible. But it's a recrafting, and so these remakes, I'm not against the concept of remaking a story. I'm not against the concept of Disney making live action versions of it. But what I am against is just the rollout, the carbon copy rollout. That we can just take this and we can just live actionify it without any actual refocusing, revisioning, recasting. And by recasting, I mean in terms of a process as opposed to literally recasting characters. And I was really excited about this film because I was like, oh, I like the idea of them taking the music out. Not because I don't love the music, because I do.
I don't.
But
I think it's stupid, and I think it's American. I think their American voices are grating nowadays, and I think it's banal, and I think it's racist, and I think it's stupid.
Hold up,
and
Sarah.
I think it's annoying.
Do you find the American accents more annoying or the faux Chinese accent?
Yeah.
I'm awfully sorry, and this is where we will get into really interesting lens discussions, though, William, and that's the thing. I thought about it, and I was watching 2020 and going, I actually appreciate, in inverted commas, that they aren't doing it with American accents, and that they are doing some attempt at, hopefully not, a stereotypical Chinese accent for English ears, although I suspect there is a bit of that. But let's be honest, my lens is as a white person, arguably an American or English Disney recipient. So for me to go, oh, this is nice, this is good that they're actually using their Chinese accents. I've subsequently read the criticism that says actually even, we'll get into how the voice coaching and whatnot had to go for American ears, which is outrageous. But no, I thought that was better. I don't want to watch foreign, if you'll forgive the inverted commas, something that is of a foreign land with American voices. To me, that is patronizing, wrong, awful, colonialist.
Can I say something
Yeah,
from my Disney, Disney raised childhood, which is, I watched Mulan in Chinese. I've seen it in Chinese a lot. I've seen Ratatouille in French. I've seen these movies, and the original American version is better. It really is. I've struggled with this in the past. Like I remember kind of not being super fond of Mulan because of the American voices. Like it just feels weird.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I think I've kind of had a 180 because I understand that Mulan, it's not a Chinese movie. It's a movie. It's not a movie for the Chinese either. It's a movie for Asian Americans. And to read so many Asian Americans nowadays in 2020 reflect so fondly back on that, and to see themselves being represented, I think that's really good stuff.
Because they sound American and look Chinese.
Yes, exactly, and that's what they identify with.
Right. That's interesting.
Whereas, as someone who's ethnically Chinese and seeing the new Mulan and hearing them speak with all sorts of weird accents, there's Cantonese accents,
Yes.
Northern Chinese, Southern Chinese accents, except speaking English. And what the heck was that decision of making the extras speak Chinese? Like, how does that even work?
I didn't even notice that.
The extras were all speaking Chinese. It's like,
I
okay,
didn't notice
just
that.
Please keep your world consistent, movie.
Right. And I hear you with the
It
accents.
really dragged me all the way out of the movie.
And that's what I mean by the lens, you see. I don't speak any Chinese, Cantonese, Mandarin, anything. So therefore I'm not going to discern accents in that way, right? And so for me, it's just absorbing a generic sort of, oh, this feels about right. But I totally hear you, William, because in the experiences that I've had, particularly perhaps with English, the variations of English accents, or even variations of American accents, absolutely I can hear things and pick things up and go, oh my goodness, you can tell that person's actually Irish. What do they think they're playing at, or whatever? And yes, it does take you out of it. So...
I definitely preferred the American accents and the animated Mulan because of the consistency.
But hang on, were they consistent? Because I feel like the matchmaker, Miriam Margolyes, who is
Is
British,
it Miriam Margolyes?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course it is.
is she not doing some sort of cod Chinese
I don't think
accent?
so. But definitely the I can't remember the actor who played her dad. He was, and Pat Morita playing the Emperor, which is really problematic. Having a Japanese guy.
Yes.
But he was putting on a little bit of accent, even though
Yes.
his natural accent is quite American.
And so that's what I noticed in 98. There was an inconsistency in that,
I would have loved to have seen the new Mulan in, would it be Mandarin or Cantonese?
Mandarin.
It would have been, I mean, it wouldn't have been the Disney moneymaker that I perhaps think they would have hoped it to be, but I would have, in terms of the visuals, it would have been a really lovely experience. It still would have been very average in terms of storytelling. Can I talk about the start of the movie? Because I was watching it, it opens with little girl Mulan.
Which one?
The new one, the 2021. It opens with a sequence with her jumping and flipping, and which is terribly CGI.
Because it doesn't look as good as Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
No.
Because it isn't.
Why does it feel like a direct-to-streaming video? Why? Is it because we're watching it direct to streaming? Because I imagine watching it on the big screen, you still have that sense of, this feels kind of cheap for a $200 million movie.
Video gamey, that
it feels like a set.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. But it has this opening where you get this story of Mulan being a bit of a tomboy, a mischief maker, whatever she is, being active, breaking things, clumsy. And then we cut to the introduction of the new character, I guess they call her the witch, but I don't know what her name is. I don't know what.
Do you mean Madonna from Frozen? From the Frozen video, basically. Is that who you
By
mean?
the way, I don't know any of the names of the other characters in this new film.
No.
I didn't pick up any names.
I mean, Jet Li plays the Emperor.
Yeah. I know there's a guy called Yao, because I looked him up.
Yes.
Anyway.
He's the Harvey Fierstein character from the animated movie.
And there's cricket. But anyway, keep going. So,
And so then we get this introduction of them sort of storming this fortress or city.
Yeah.
And then we jump back to Mulan, and I was like, this is such a messy opening. Why didn't they just start with introducing the villain and introducing the conflict between the villain and the Emperor? So we get like a prologue, and then we jump to Mulan. Like, that makes sense to me. And that's exactly how the animated film opens.
Yeah.
The animated film is so much cleaner. It's like, here's the central conflict, and then we're going to jump to our
Did
lead.
you watch them in that order? Did you watch the new one first?
Well, I'd seen the original Mulan back when I was a kid, and then I hadn't seen it until after the new one, which I appreciated watching it like that.
I have this down. The first line of my notes for Mulan 98 is instant steaks.
Instant
steaks.
Oh,
Like
steaks.
well,
Yes.
yes. The not the meaty kind. Basically, yeah, I completely agree with you, Jeremy. Like the new Mulan feels so weirdly lopsided, and maybe it just didn't grab me the right way because the kid physics was way off. But like the anime Mulan, you get what this whole story is about, right? You know why they're conscripting people for the army, and all of that is included within what, a 5-minute time span? You don't need to jump forward and back. Yeah, agreed. Definitely agreed.
I like what they're trying to do with the. Again, I hate to call her the witch character, but that's all I've got.
Well, what is she called?
She is a witch. They call her a
I
witch.
know, but it's derogatory, right? She's a master of the chi.
Yeah. And also,
They all are.
which is like the word witch is just weird because witches don't
Yeah, but they
exist.
call-
It doesn't exist in Chinese mythology.
Okay.
Like it's such a Western, and the phoenix is such a Western thing. But let's not talk about that.
Well, I'm keen to. I'm keen to talk about it. Yeah, but the kind of dynamic between her and the main villain, not fully realised. That he's sort of oppressing her, and I like her journey of seeing that true respect from a man's world is possible. I thought that was a nice arc. And of course, I knew she was going to die saving Mulan from the moment that there was some complication with her allegiance to her boss. But I don't know. Like, I would have loved to have had her as just the central villain, and that she did have a change, and so maybe there was somebody else that threatened Mulan's life, and she sacrificed. That moment was great, but it was just a messy story.
And I think Gong Li is really good. She's probably my favorite part of the movie. She is. Yeah.
I'm so interested in what you said, William, about Mulan 98 being created for Asian Americans. That is so interesting to me because I would add, surely also Disney being Disney, it didn't expect its audience to be purely Asian Americans. It will have expected it to be all Americans, and therefore the Orientalism in the clinical sense of let's look at what China is like, and the aspects now that might give one the cringe a little bit because you think, there's a lot of well, as I say, Orientalism, treating something as the other and casting it in a certain way that might make one uncomfortable now. 2020, it's still Disney, so who is it created for? Was it created for the Chinese market? Or was it created for everybody who watches Disney, which brings it that perilous situation of having to be all things to all people and winding up being no things to no people?
I think you're absolutely correct, Sarah. It's all things to all people, but not at all. It is for the Chinese market, and it is for the American market. And that kind of dichotomy and that confusion, I think it hurts the movie. It actively does.
What could it have done then? So here's a question. If they had done it, and arguably without a female, white, non-Asian, non-Indigenous, anybody director, if they had had a Chinese director, Chinese cast, Chinese language, and it still could have looked as beautiful and as dramatic and been such an action flick, would the Americans have watched it?
Well, I mean, if it's a good story and it's well told, absolutely. I think the simplicity of the Mulan story is there, and it's like if you fiddle around with that too much, you start to unpick the beauty of that tale. And I love, like when we talked about that poem at the start, the song or poem.
Yeah.
That's the story's there. You know, it's a woman that goes off to war for her father, and has to pretend to be a man, and then earns the respect of the men, and they find out she's a woman, and then they're okay with it.
Yeah.
So why didn't Disney take a risk and make a Chinese film?
Because it's a risk, Sarah.
Yeah,
Because
like the Great Wall, right?
These live action. Well, the Great Wall is
Great
very
Wall is a
different.
hybrid, right? Because it was designed to be attractive to the Chinese market.
No,
but it
that's
also...
the opposite way around.
Oh.
Great Wall is a Chinese movie designed to be attractive to
the
the American market.
Right.
Which is, man, that movie sucks.
Right.
It's so bad.
So again, it falls between all
it
cracks.
falls between, yeah.
Look, I mean, Matt Damon's got a ponytail though, so
And Wait, Pedro Pascal's in that movie, right? As
Yes.
his comedic sidekick.
I haven't seen
And
it.
Willem Dafoe, I'm the guy after the black powder. I speak like
Yeah.
this.
Okay, well, never
And-
mind Great Wall. So what went so wrong with Mulan 2020?
I think, to be honest, you guys, I don't think it's the culture stuff. I think it's the fact that, as I said before, it's just a very lazy updating
Yeah.
of stuff that people have fond memories towards back in their childhoods.
I agree.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Can I talk about the music? I know, Sarah, you don't like it, but the first one is a musical. And as we know, I love musicals. William, you're a big fan of musicals. And Sarah, you're a big fan
I'm
of
a big
musicals.
fan
as
of
well.
musicals.
But this is an interest. The Mulan 1998 is an interesting film to me from a musical perspective because the music itself, I love the music itself. There's some really good songs in there. For a musical to work, you need an opening number that introduces you to the world of this musical, and there's the dun, 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 dun,
the Matchmaker
dun,
song.
The Matchmaker song kind of doesn't really introduce the world. It introduces the expectations on Mulan. So there's sort of a weird that song sort of feels like it's sort of we're in the song, and it's because we haven't been introduced to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful reflection song. That's her ballad, the big ballad that usually comes in
I Want
second.
song, yeah.
The I Want song. And then there's some brilliant songs that are the gender play in the 1998 Mulan is fantastic and nowhere near as delicate or works in the new film. But the Make a Man Out of You and A Girl Worth Fighting For, great concept songs. And there's two things I'll say to those two songs. Number one is Make a Man Out of You. There are these solo bits in that song that get sung by different characters that are just voiceovers of action. So clearly they've changed things so much in the process and then they've not recrafted the story to fit it. And I was like, this feels unfinished. And then A Girl Worth Fighting For is perfectly set up to have the reprise down the line when they realise that she is someone, she's the girl worth fighting for, but in a completely different context. She's the girl worth fighting behind as opposed to the one fighting for back home. Which never comes
There's
up.
a musical cue, but that's it.
It's-
Did you know why?
Why?
Like, it's so cool that you bring this stuff up because behind the scenes of Mulan, like all sorts of changes, including all the songs were originally written by Stephen Schwartz. So Wicked and Godspell, I think, is also Stephen Schwartz. But he was poached by Jeffrey Katzenberg when he left to found DreamWorks, and so Schwartz ended up doing the music for Prince of Egypt. And so they had to very quickly scramble and redo so much of the music from scratch. And I think it really shows in the final movie. Because, again, I completely agree. Girl We're Fighting For, not only does it like, require a reprise, but it's actually the final song of the movie. And there's only 5 songs because they cut all the other songs.
I love that. I was watching Prince of Egypt with my nephews the other day. Music
so good.
is
It's
so
so
good.
I was singing it this morning.
It's so I forgot how wonderful it is, and we only watched the first half an hour because we got interrupted. But so good, and also the tone of Mulan in the middle of the Girl Worth Fighting For. Girl Worth Fighting For. Cut to decimated village.
So good.
And that's the end of the frivolity in the movie, except for the random ending. So there's not the last song, William.
Oh my god, no! You reminded me of the final song.
Dun, 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 dun.
True to your heart.
But
True to your heart.
there is some
Credits.
missed opportunity. So to come full circle, back to your question, Sarah, even though I was looking forward to seeing a non-musical version of Mulan in the vein of something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I now would just love to see a good live-action musical with the ending fixed, with some other song in there. And on that note, I'm going to then springboard and say, I am hoping and praying that the new Hercules live-action remake is going to be a musical.
No.
And that they do it proper, because that music is brilliant
It
as well.
has to be a musical, right? I can't
Are they
imagine-
doing a live action Hercules?
They are.
Yeah.
Wow.
Have you seen the original?
Who cares?
Oh, the music's so good.
Maybe when it came out, I don't care.
So good, that music.
I would not see a live action Hercules, and I would not see a live action musical Hercules, and I did not want songs in this Mulan. I wanted it to be a beautiful Chinese spectacular, and if we can look and speak quickly about the aesthetics, I think it achieved that. The costumes and I love a good bit of chinoiserie, as you know.
Speaking of Great War, right? It reminded me a lot of the Great War with all the coloured armour and like the contrast between kind of the muted, beautiful muted mountains and the backdrops, and the extras and the main characters in their super neon bright armor.
And there were some stunning nighttime shots by the water. I mean, there were some beautiful, beautiful moments. Photographed, incidentally, by Mandy, can't remember her surname, Australian cinematographer. So, I mean, I think it looked beautiful. I thought the action sequences were fine, and so on and so forth. I did not want songs in that. That would have just made it silly.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that you just inject songs into this version of the movie. Not at all.
How can you put songs into a Hercules movie?
Oh, you've got to watch it,
No, but
Sarah.
that's the animated version.
Oh, but it's like, I mean, if you have like, it's what's his name? Menken? Is it?
Yeah,
Menken.
Menken.
I mean, he,
Going full Motown.
It's like that Little Shop of Horrors, and the way Little Shop of Horrors is filmed, and because it's Menken as well, is every shot is choreographed, and it's this vibrant, punchy, cartoony world that is. I would love to see a Hercules version of that. You can't do a Niki Caro naturalistic version of Mulan with music in it. I'm not suggesting that.
I'm going to say this. Like, it's unfortunate that, well, in my opinion, it's unfortunate that the songs were cut out of modern or live-action Mulan. But at least they replaced it with a score that was memorable. No, they didn't. I'm
looking at you. I'm looking at you going, I can't remember it. Okay, I'm sure. I trust you.
Really?
Because you were starting to say, but I'm excited for the score.
Okay.
Because
what? Okay.
I recently did a podcast on Hans Zimmer.
Okay.
Which we mentioned in our last podcast.
Which we mentioned in our last podcast.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when I'm watching films and I hear glimmers of Zimmer, if you will.
Glimmers of Zimmer.
Yeah,
what a wonderful
you can have
alliteration.
that. I'll hear glimmers of Zimmer.
Consonants.
But then I'll think, but this is not a Zimmer score. And then I'm like, I wonder if this is a Harry Gregson Williams score.
Yeah, it was.
Or Rupert Gregson Williams.
I think this was Harry, right?
It's one of them. And I'll very quickly look that up. And so, because I heard moments of Gladiator, and then I heard moments of Pirates of the Caribbean, and then I heard something that could almost be Inception-like, and I was like, surely not. But surely, as it turns out. So, for those who are listening and who have not listened to my The Sound of Movies podcast,
which is worth listening to. I said it in our last podcast. It is a wonderful listen. If you like movies and music, Sarah has done a wonderful job in that. And I hope you've got another episode coming soon.
I have another episode coming soon.
Oh, good.
So the interesting thing for me is that Hans Zimmer was nothing to do with the music for this, but Harry Gregson Williams is part of Hans Zimmer's music-making collective. And so quite often you'll hear Gregson Williams scores which evoke glimmers of Zimmer, if you will. So that's what I liked this, but you tell me why you didn't.
Because there was nothing there. There was no, that's not true. There was something there, and it was every time they used reflections as an orchestral version of reflections to try and build up to some sort of emotional catharsis. So this wantonly crass usage of nostalgia to say, hey guys, feel something, please. I hated it. Whereas the 98 Mulan, Jerry Goldsmith, the score is awesome. The da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-dum, boom, boom. And like that whole sequence with the avalanche.
Yes.
I felt, that's not true. I thought the live action stuff, there were some cool shots with all the ice coming down and everything being white. But to be honest, I really felt all of that worked so much better in animation.
I agree.
With the Huns coming down.
There's
so much more emotion.
The timing was way better of the animated version of that scene. And I was anticipating it in 2020, and then it was like, what is she playing at?
Well, I guess because in the 2021, just the staging is different, right?
Yes.
It's not the army of 6,000 Huns charging down the slope. They're stationary, firing these silly Game of Thrones looking catapults. And trebuchets, yes. Yeah. And she is the one moving around.
Yes.
And everything just feels so much more static because her friends, they're stuck in these turtle shell formations. No one's moving apart from Mulan. Whereas in the 98 Mulan, everyone is moving. Her friends are chasing after her. They see the avalanche. They turn back. The avalanche is destroying everything. Mushu and the cricket are on this shield snowboarding down. Like, there's so much motion.
Yeah.
And that is supposed to be the action climax. And it just doesn't feel quite there. It's not bad in the new one. but compared to the old one, it doesn't hold a candle to it. Plus the music, of course, which is so rousing.
One thing that I noticed that I didn't mind when I was watching the 2020 film, but then it was really evident when I watched the 1998 movie, was the sparseness of the palace in the 2020 version. It felt very hero. And then there was such a bustling energy, when Mulan's trying to get attention of the people, and the men are all like, and there's a huge audience watching this great sequence on the top of the fireworks tower and things like that. It was interesting. There was much more of an energy in that 98 climax than there was. What did you feel about that?
I don't know. Like I found the climax of the 2020 version to be very confusing. Can you guys answer this question? And I don't have an answer.
Wait, is this a question about a temporal pincer?
It may very well be. What is the point? Okay. Why? Why did they choose to stage the final one-on-one conflict in such a claustrophobic space? Because we've seen pretty cool action scenes throughout the movie where she's riding a horse, she's flip-kicking spears into people's chests, and it's like, okay, this is pretty cool. I'm all for this. You've seen the Rorans, magically wire up a war, and it's all very expansive, and it feels grandiose and very Game of Thrones-y, wuxia cool. And to choose to end your movie amongst these like really tight bamboo-filled spaces, and then to have the two of them on like a seesaw, why did they do that? It was so disappointing from an action standpoint, and it wasn't choreographed very well either.
Yeah, I agree. The movie sort of just lost it, and I also wasn't clear, unless I missed a piece of dialogue. I was not clear what the relationship was between the main villain and the emperor, and there was something about your father, or
because the emperor killed his dad, right? Who was the previous Khan. And
when was that introduced?
When they're having their little meeting of Khans, like, what do nomads need with riches? And he's like, whoa, if not for riches, then revenge.
Yeah, very, very poorly brought into the film and so unclear.
It's pretty cool to see the actor. What's his name? Jason Scott Lee. To see him get more stuff to do.
He had a great face, and it really fit the villain of the original film.
When we were in year 11, we studied one of his movies called Map of the Human Heart.
Yes.
Yeah, and I remember like, oh right, this guy ended up playing Bruce Lee, and now he's in a huge Disney movie. Good for him.
So speaking of which, let's talk about the fact that Mulan 2020 was shot in this country, and so a lot of the people that we know were on the crew, and some cast members and whatnot as well. So I guess we can talk about things that a lot of them can't. I haven't spoken to any of them, I should say, so it's not like I know secret thoughts, but part of me feels defensive about the reception of Mulan 2020. I feel a little bit defensive for Niki Caro, because I think she did what she was employed to do, and I think she did it as well as one can within that context. Because let's be honest, I think we would all agree that if you got the chance to work for Disney, there would be a massive limit on the extent to which you might be able to say, excuse me, do you suppose that we could make this actually seem Chinese? Or how about if we did, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there will be limits on what she could do, and I think she did a good job, as we've said. This is also a wonderful opportunity for a whole lot of Asian New Zealand actors to actually have roles and perform in a massive budget, wide release kind of film.
Yeah.
And
my mum actually wanted to audition when they had auditions on. She didn't end up going, but yeah.
But how marvelous, you know. And so I think this brings us round to representation, and that big question that I held for Black Panther and for Wonder Woman and for Moana, I suppose. At what point do we maybe, and this is a rhetorical question, at what point do we go, well, at least there's representation, or do we go, no, we have expectations that representation be absolutely the best that it can possibly be, and we do not go, oh well, at least it's kind of South Pacific and we'll take it for now and maybe the next one will be better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Black Panther had a lot of issues, but it was still the first and the biggest and the most significant. So, at what point do people say, no, It is not okay that Africa is treated as African and all the same. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna do something for unforgivable probably right now, which is I'm gonna try defend the character of Mushu. I think he's very problematic. I think the whole Eddie Murphy as sassy black guy trope really gets on your nerves, and it's also really problematic. And also in a Chinese context, like you can kind of understand why a lot of Chinese audiences apparently back in the day did not respond well to Mushu. That being said, there is something to be said for how Mulan 98, and I think Mulan 98 works better for representation. And I'll say why. Even with Mushu, even with the American voices, even with cricket and the Cricky and the stupid R&B ending, that ending. I think it's because Mulan 98 presents itself with fantastical elements, and I really think that is the case. It's how Black Panther did it. Black Panther is it's a futurist, African state. Mulan 98, from the very get-go, you see the ancestors and you see Mushu and he's jive talking. You're like, okay, this isn't really China, right? It can't be. And I know Mulan 2020 has the witch sorceress character, and they keep talking about Chi all the goddamn time. But I feel like in its bones, it wants to be a Chinese historical epic.
Which one? 2020?
2020.
Yeah.
In its very existence, it wants to be one of the movies that China, the Chinese film industry, churns out by the dozens every year. Like, it wants to be that. And when you have that, people are going to start nitpicking. And it's just been so interesting to see all the Asian audiences, both in China and in the United States, talk about everything that Mulan 2020 gets wrong. And maybe it's going back to your point, Sarah, about having a animated world with animated characters. Is just, there's something different with that compared to having, quote, real people.
Yes.
Real people in real costumes, real period outfits.
Get away with.
That's right, when it's a cartoon.
Yes.
And so, one of the big ones, I saw Mulan 2020 with my family, and the moment the movie started, and she goes back to her childhood home, the circular Tulou, my mum was like, wait, Mulan is a northern story, so this is southern China. Tulou are very much a Hakka, way of residence. And why would you do this? This is geographically, you're already way off. And it just snowballed from there. The outfits were all from different dynasties. All the little things were wrong. And it's not because they didn't try. I think it just works. There's a ton of little things being wrong in the American version. The 98 version as well. But you accept it for what it is because it's a cartoon. I remember being super confused when, as a kid, I saw Mushu roast a dumpling on a fire. It's like, you would never do that.
Yeah, right.
But as an adult, I understand. It doesn't matter because he's a cartoon dragon roasting a cartoon dumpling, speaking with the voice of Eddie Murphy. So there is much more of a mental disconnect in the new one because it is live action.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about, in terms of representation, not so much ethnic representation, but, not only representation, but just the gender politics. So you've got a woman being a man, very Shakespearean in the animated film, which, it works well because, with a slight whip of her hair and the way that she's been animated, she looks masculine, and it works. It didn't work for me in the new one. She's so clearly a woman in the new one, and it was very strange to me. I couldn't suspend my disbelief quite in the same way that I could, say, if I'm watching a play on stage, or and I've had this issue with seeing, say, a film version of Twelfth Night, or you can tell it's a woman generally dressed as a man.
And again, it comes down to what your brain will put up with. And so we watch an animation and we go, oh, but we know what this is meant to be. And we go to blimmin' Shakespeare plays and they're ludicrous and they're not, and there's no real pretense that this person is a girl or a boy or whatever. And we go along with it because it's the theatre.
Yeah.
And the minute that you're in
like the animated case,
a real person movie, live action movie, I don't think we can do that disconnect so
That,
easily.
that abstraction just isn't there,
Absolutely.
that extra layer.
And I found the attraction of the love interest, I don't know his name. He was great, by the way, that young New Zealand actor.
Yeah.
I've seen him in the Luminaries as well. He's a very different character, Luminaries. But he's attracted to Mulan when he thinks she's a man.
Yeah. Who he can really talk to.
Yeah, and so there's this attraction there, and then sort of sly glances and things like that. And then there's kind of a moment at the end where they touch hands. And just the treatment of... There's just no treatment of either the homoerotic nature of that story, or the attraction of that, or the confusion of that, or what that means. It's
But
just
they touch
this
hands
thing-
when she's a girl. They only touch hands when she's been revealed as a woman.
I know, but he's very clearly attracted to
He's
him.
like sniffing
her.
him, like, oh, you smell bad.
Yeah, but not even that. There's like
that's
some
what
slow-
crows do.
No, because that's from the animated film, right? Isn't that the thing
he
that
doesn't
they can't
sniff
let
her.
go of? Oh, I see.
It's the dragon that Mushu does it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was thinking, this is like they've just not really thought this through. Like this is not. They haven't thought this through. Either it's a Disney film, so they're always going to be careful around sexual politics anyway. But I was like, this is just not being thought through. Whereas the original film, because I was like, oh man, I was gearing up to feel very problematic with, because in that one it's her superior as well, right? Which is why they changed it in this new one. But in the original, there's no suggestion of attraction from him to her until he's aware of her being a woman. Which just solves any of them having to investigate some really complicated sexual and gender politics. She's attracted to him because she knows he's a man, right? And she knows she's a woman. For me, it was very interesting.
And you think they're going to do a live action Hercules with songs?
That's my soul, Hercules on a roll.
I don't know.
It's so good, Sarah. It's so good.
Live action with songs.
I mean, if you're going to have Hades in blue with flaming blue hair, it's going to be ridiculous. I cannot wait.
Get James Woods back as Hades. No, please don't. Please don't.
Gosh.
Also get Roger Bart back as Hercules' singing voice.
So, I want to ask you something, William. You said that you'd watch Mulan 2020. I think you meant 2020 in Chinese.
No. I watched it in China. I watched the '98 one in Chinese back in the day.
Right.
And I remember rewatching it in English right after and thinking, oh, this works much better in English. I guess because of the intonations and the lip syncing and a lot of the animation stuff. It's like, okay, so it was intended to be in a certain language.
So, out of interest, Eddie Murphy's character in the Chinese version sounds like what?
The one I watched was the Taiwanese dub, so they got a pretty famous comedian who was just like, blah, 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 like a fast talker, right?
Right. Oh, interesting. Because that's interesting. Okay. All right. So I know that they can't have done the 2020 in Chinese because the actors were speaking English.
Yeah.
But there will be.
Maybe there is a dub. Is there a dub out there, or is there not?
You'd imagine there must be.
Because it wouldn't be too difficult. It's not too much dialogue.
But you see, that's interesting to me, is the dissonance of watching a film in a different language, but watching it through your visual lens and expecting something different.
Because I remember intentionally searching down a version of Ratatouille in French, because I think my French was good enough to understand what was going on, and I loved the movie. I thought it would be more authentic.
But
it's not bad.
But it's not built to
It's
be
not built-
French.
Exactly. And so, like, the main character was, let's just say, no Patton Oswalt, right?
Right.
The little ticks and the timing was just slightly off. Yeah. My main beef with Mulan 2020 is how Mulan learns to be a hero. Yeah.
How?
She is all about that manifest destiny. Why? Why, you guys? The beauty of, as Jimmy, you said it before, like the beauty of the character in the 98 version is that she starts off as someone, okay, she's smart, you see her with the chess game, and she has gumption, but she is not the best of all the soldiers. As a matter of fact, all the soldiers suck. And through the beauty of a montage and through their camaraderie, you see, the relationships develop, you see the characters develop, and you see her overcome things in her way. Like, she's not a superhero. And in Mulan 2020, they turn it into a superhero. She is hiding her powers like Superman. She has everything that's already been inside her. She walks up the mountain not because she trained, but because she already has more strength than the other guys. I found that to be so disappointing, and it's boring. And it reminds me, I was telling you, Jeremy, it reminds me of Spider-Man, or The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield. That's the official name of the movie. But basically, that one, Spider-Man was always destined to be Spider-Man because his parents had genetically engineered him to be Spider-Man. Whereas the beauty of the Spider-Man story is that any kid, any random nerdy kid, could have the potential to be Spider-Man if he was in the right place at the right time. And Mulan 98 understands that. Mulan 2020, in my eyes, does not. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Also, Chi, the concept of Chi being the Force.
Can we just end it there?
Yes.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are also great places to let us know what you think of this episode, or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then,
Ka kite ano.